Hi, Roy here. I thought I'd pop in to do a Victober video.
Yay!
Victober, as you probably know, is a month celebrating and exploring Victorian literature. The original hosts included Katie Lumsden, Books and Things, and Kate Howe, who are still at the helm with a bunch of other hosts. And this being the 10th year of the event, that group of hosts has been expanded to 10, and I'm one of them, amazingly. So obviously I will be making videos about books I've read, the challenges, all of which are detailed down below, by the way, together with the other hosts. But this isn't directly about those, it's about Victorian crazes. We had a bit of a chat in one of our secret host meetings, which are held in the hireable function room of Barchester Cathedral. Which is good value, but you have to have their catering. Anyway, we were talking about Oh, it's not that funny. We were talking about videos that...
Did you have to have small glasses of sherry and little biscuits?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. Excellent.
Talking about videos other than the pure book ones, and this is an idea I came up with that seems to have found some favour, so here we go. So I'm talk about things that people in the Victorian times got super enthusiastic about. It does relate to literature because they're the sort of things that might get mentioned by an author who will assume that their readership will already know all about them. But not only that, they'll know sort of what they mean, you know, so, and that might not be so apparent to us. And there is big stuff like that, so the politics of the time, you know, what you'd expect from the main political parties, for instance. They probably wouldn't put an essay in, so you know the difference between liberals and conservatives, for instance. Religious debates as well, the big high church versus low church stuff. Again, they might just assume you know all about that. Not so much talking about big things, I'm talking about more like cultural things and fun things, although some of them do reflect the big things. So diving in, number one on my list is, yes, B for bicycles. I was going to do an alphabet of these, but 26 was too many. Then I thought of a top 10, but 10, you know, newfangled decimal didn't seem to be quite Victorian enough, so there are 12.
Plantagenet wouldn't have minded though.
Absolutely no. Plantagenet Palliser would have been pleased to see decimalisation creeping in. Yes. At this stage. Anyway, yes, bicycles. They were a thing with wheels and moving about. So I guess I'm particularly thinking of bicycles being ridden by women, and it was part of a whole thing of sort of women's emancipation, not so much women's suffrage and getting the vote as a sort of cultural freedom, including things like change of dress, what was called rational dress, things like bloomers and trousers, which were more practical and you could ride, for instance, ride a bike on them. Sometimes lumped in with other sort of apparently masculine behaviours like smoking. And they're just, like a lot of things, there seem to be, on the one hand, ridicule and on the other hand, fear. Fear that the women would be, they can go anywhere, it's dangerous, what's going to happen to them?
'Twas ever thus.
Out there on their own. So that's a thing, a woman on a bicycle, it's not just that's how she happens to get from A to B, it's probably got a little bit more to it. There was actually a cycling detective. Dora Merle, the lady detective, she rode a bike. She's pretty new womanish, and The bicycle features, she's whizzing about, she's going faster than a hansom cab. I love this book cover where she's sort of moving out of the frame of the picture as if she's going so fast that she can't be quite captured by the drawing. So it's sort of got an air of modernity and kind of liberation, and it's a bit sort of avant-garde. So Dora Merle, for instance, she's described as being a graduate of Cambridge, whiz at maths, with a degree in medicine.
Wow.
But she couldn't get a practice going.
Practice.
So she ended up being a private detective because she wasn't patient enough. She's been a telegraph girl, a telephone girl, and a lady journalist, which she liked the best. So I guess you get the picture of the whole bicycle thing. One thing I hadn't been aware of, though, was the terrible danger of something called bicycle face.
What?
Yes, bicycle
face
was actually proposed or propounded, is that a word?
It's a word.
As a sort of nervous disorder. Something that excessive bicycle riding could give you, and this idea floated around. Like I said, it was a serious idea, although it did create some kind of humour as well. So here's a quote from a newspaper at the time being the 1890s. The bicycle face. Bicycles are responsible for many things in our social life. The bicycle feet and the bicycle hands are already registered in medical annals. Now, says the Daily Telegraph, a doctor has discovered the bicycle face. Why do men, and women too, acquire such anxious, weary, worn, haggard looks compared with the time when they used to indulge in croquet, boating or lawn tennis?
What?
The first answer will probably be that they come from too late hours, or the worry of business, or the effects of the ballroom. Those effects of the ballroom. Mistake!
Ballroom.
These looks are due to the bicycle. So much anxiety is developed in learning to ride the popular vehicle, and when that science has become acquired in avoiding the accidents of various kinds which it invites, that it insensibly affects the muscles of the face, gives even the openest and blandest physiognomy an eager, careworn expression, which is retained.
You'll stick like it if the wind changes.
Yes,
Is
it
that
is
what it
exactly
is?
like that. I suppose because you're generating your own wind by. Yeah. Retained during the other hours of life. So the idea is that you get this anxious, careworn face, and it does stick with you. And it also goes further, that it affects your mentality, so that you don't only look humourless, you feel humourless as well. Yeah. So I traced it back to a guy called Dr. Shadwell.
Dr. Shadwell!
Who seems to have been the originator of it. Bicycling differs from any other occupation whatever. The strain of attending to it may not be very great in itself, but it never ceases. This incessant tension is the thing which tells upon the nerves. Some time ago I drew attention to the peculiar, strained, set look so often associated with this pastime, and called it the bicycle face. The general adoption of the phrase since then indicates a general recognition of its justice. Some wear the face. No!
I've got bicycle face! Help me!
Oh dear. Expressions either anxious, irritable, or at least stony. Okay, moving on. Moving on from bicycles to Egypt. There was Egyptomania.
There was.
In a way, there's always been Egyptomania. Egyptomania, fascination with ancient Egypt, obviously got a big boost in the 1920s with big new discoveries. But it was around a lot earlier, and you had things like mummy unwrapping parties. There were countless thousands of mummies. They were almost like a natural resource. They were used for all sorts of purposes, including making paint. Mummy brown is a pigment that's replicated in modern times.
Did you know mummy brown is also the paint that's known as caput mortuum?
Oh,
Dead head.
Right.
So you can still buy caput mortuum hue.
Any good? Don't call me Hugh.
It's not, but it's like dried blood.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. It's one of my favourite colours.
Okay,
For
good.
painting, you understand. But yeah, mummy brown.
And I mean, you could have like whole massive videos about it, but part of the fascination, I guess, is the incredible ancientness and the relative unknownness of that period. You know, there was the idea that they actually had sort of super science and technologies and mental powers that have been lost over the millennia. I guess the idea of princesses as well. You know, the hope in your admittedly pretty disturbing mummy unwrapping party would be that you'd actually find somebody with valuables and things like that, or some notable person. And it fed through into fashions and things like that. So Egypt was around. Moving on to ferns. There was fern mania as well.
Wow.
Which is why you got books like this, British Ferns. So yes, ferns. There's a great variety of them. They're pretty easy to grow, even I've grown some. And it wasn't just rich people who would go plant hunting. It could be anybody, you know, so that it actually spread to all sorts of people, getting out into the countryside, new access to the countryside via the railways, collecting ferns.
Or on your bike.
On your, oh yeah,
That,
on your
those
bike.
two bits of fern poking out of there look like there might be a small green man hiding inside your book.
Well,
So
when
careful.
I got this book, I was delighted to find pressed between the pages time travellers from focus from the period, actual ferns. So that was somebody was actually, and also putting them in. I've displaced some of them, but they're sort of put in by the description of the relevant fern. So it was a thing people did. It was another thing that was seen as perhaps being something the new kind of young woman would do. Pressing ferns. Seaweed was another one, actually, making a seaweed album. So this sort of collecting nature, that was a thing. Fern mania. What else? Ah, yes. Green spectacles. Green spectacles. Which, they were a thing, kind of like sunglasses, and yet they seem to be loaded with meaning whenever they crop up. Edgar Allan Poe's detective Dupin, he wears them. In Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, there's a supporting character called Sir Harry Towers, who seems to be like a nice guy, but he's unlucky in love. He can never get, despite his wealth, he can't find a woman he wants to be with. So there's this little passage. I haven't got much brains myself, I know, the baronet would add deprecatingly. I don't want a strong-minded woman who writes books and wears green spectacles. Ooh. But hang it, I like a gal who knows what she's talking about. So there's a sort of caricature there of a sort of super intellectual woman with the green spectacles.
That's green lenses.
Green lenses, yeah. Because it's also put across as like a sort of rarefied vision, you know, someone who's got a sort of intellectualized and not realistic perception of things is seeing them through green spectacles. Which I can't see through because I need reading glasses. So in Wilkie Collins' Armadale, there's a character who's a bit comic relief, really, a rather soppy fellow. It comes on there's a really interesting picnic section. A young man who plays his part in society by looking on in green spectacles and listening with a sickly smile. Maybe a prodigy of intellect and a mine of virtue. But he's hardly perhaps the right sort of man to have at a picnic. Yes, green spectacles.
Do you want your green spectacles
I
back?
do want my green spectacles
You
back.
can wear them if you're getting a migraine, and it helps to stop the slipping.
Okay,
I
good.
have hair. Well,
Well, moving on quite neatly is into health. H for health. I think Victorians, and this is probably like everybody throughout time, but there was certainly an obsession with health in Victorian times. My evidence is the advertisements in magazines, where I've noticed that probably the majority of them relate to health, like specific health products and remedies, or even if they're for something else, there's usually a little health spin given to them. So looking at this, which is a Cassell's magazine from 1899, Sen, throat ease and breath perfume. You get Blair's gout pills. You get phosphomuriate of quinine.
of course you do.
Splendid pick-me-up.
Lovely.
Best tonic for everybody. It's excellent for building up the system after illness. Restores vitality, renews vigour and energy. Strengthens the nervous system. Roundtree's Elect Cocoa. So this is, it's cocoa, but they're selling it as being a warmth-giving, stimulating and sustaining beverage. So you got these incredibly wordy, high-minded adverts got a lot of reading in them. Adversity, the sweet milk of adversity, philosophy. It is for you to find out why your ears are boxed. Quote, life is not given to us merely for the sake of living, but always with an ulterior aim, says Carlyle. Huxley asks, who are the really great and successful men of the world? Those who take honours in nature's university, who learn the laws which govern men and things and obey them. And it goes on and on and on. What they're advertising is Eno's fruit salt.
I want to know what the health-giving properties of the Singer sewing machines are.
Well,
Because there's an advert there.
special reduction for cash. We do not make or sell cycles of any kind. They're not associated with...
No bicycle face from us.
Yeah.
Just get a sewing machine face instead.
Quaker Oats is the easy food. Remedy for indigestion. Remedy of the day, Dr. Rook's Solar Elixir. And Dr. Rook's Oriental Pills. Mellin's food for infants. So, yes, health was a big obsession, I reckon. Certainly judging by the kind of products that they wanted people to buy. Moving on, I think being Victorian was a sort of craze. In other words, they knew they were Victorians. They thought of themselves as Victorians. So you had things like the Victorian era exhibition happening during Queen Victoria's lifetime. So that kind of, we're defining a whole bunch of stuff by who's on the throne, just seems to be a popular idea. Sorry about that, I do not know what it was. Yes, so, Victorianism, and this would be something that probably had bound into it ideas of progress and empire and civilization.
So at what point in the reign did they know they were Victorians?
Well, that Victorian era exhibition was late 19th century. So.
Right. Because he wouldn't have known right from the start that you were Victorian.
I guess not. I think the longevity of the reign was a thing.
Yeah.
You had two big jubilees. They were a big deal. Spiritualism. The belief in an afterlife and the fact that the idea that we can contact people from the afterlife, in other words, the dead, there being no death. That really caught on. There's people who believed it, there's people who thought it was ridiculous, lots of people in between. Crops up a lot in fiction, sometimes in detail. There could be a séance or something as part of a story, or you might just get a random and slightly baffling reference to rappers or table movers or any of those sort of things. Some of the more famous spiritualists like W.T. Stead might be mentioned based on their beliefs without it necessarily being sort of explained. So that was very much in the air. And who could forget the X-ray craze of 1896? So X-rays were discovered. I guess unlike spiritualism, it's widely thought that they're real things, real science. And people love going to public lectures and demonstrations and having their own hands x-rayed and stuff like that. You could even get fluoroscopes to have at home. What could possibly go wrong? So just for a while there was an absolute fascination with x-rays. The Woman in White, which is a book. And that was a book that became a craze. It became a craze when it was a serial, so before it was even a book. So The Woman in White, novel by Wilkie Collins, sort of first big sensation novel, certainly crystallised a lot of those sensation elements. People were wild for it. They would go to the offices of All the Year Round, the magazine where it was being published, because that was the first place you could get copies, I think, on a Thursday afternoon and evening. So it was like people had to find out what was happening. It was allegedly read by people from the highest echelons of society through to everybody. So people were mad for it. There was perfume, there was merchandise, there was dressing up. It's odd really, because in a way, The Woman in White isn't quite the hero of the story. Personally, I think it's more Marion Halcombe. People loved her as well. Some guy named his boat after her. Named his boat after Marion Halcombe because he wanted the boat to have Marion Halcombe-like qualities. But yeah, it was a thing, like, classic water cooler novel. Everyone was reading it, finding out what happened, and then of course it was books and a single volume book, and it's never been out of print and so on. So that was a craze.
And we've watched about 90 versions of it.
Yeah, I think 2.
There might be 3.
Sugar.
I
think you could characterise the Victorian age as being the sweet age of sugar, with, quoting now from a piece called Sugar by Laura Eastlake. You can get that on the web. I'll probably put a link to it. Victorian period witnessed a staggering rise in global production from around 572,000 tonnes in 1830 to 6.1 million tonnes by 1890.
What?
Board of Trade returns show the average individual's consumption in Britain increased 6-fold in the same period.
Great God Almighty!
Yeah, so it was sugar, everything was sweet. Victorian consumers could buy sugar in conical loaves for household baking, in cubes for adding to tea and coffee, and as mechanisation advanced in an increasingly vast and affordable array of bonbons, sugar plums and chocolate confections.
Actually, Max Miller,
the food guy,
tasting history guy, did a very it was the first of his videos that I watched. Did a very interesting video about how sugar plums are made.
Oh right, so
and that talks about sugar and that sort of thing. So Max Miller on
I
sugar
think
plums. Look it up.
Duty came off of it at some point as well, which obviously made it loads more affordable. Same with newspapers. Newspapers used to have this sort of stamp duty on them, so they're the equivalent of about £20 each. So obviously not many people were reading them. And then once that was abolished, then you got like a vast proliferation of newspapers, and they were like loads cheaper. Yellowbacks. Yellowback books like this one. Back equals yellow. Subject of one of my least uninteresting videos.
Least uninteresting?
Yeah, talking about how the colour yellow seems to have been associated with a certain kind of book. They weren't just fiction, but they were synonymous with popular fiction. So you're getting novels, one volume usually, affordable, distributed to places like railway stations by W.H. Smith, a celebrity of the time. And I guess it's part of a whole, not just the Yellowbacks, but it's a whole popularisation of reading and popularisation of fiction. You know, the three-decker novels, you'd get them from circulating libraries. You were paying 3 times to get to the end of the book. Here you're paying an affordable price for a portable book, and you can just take it away and read it. Miraculous. Plus, I mean, obviously this is very old now, would have been like super bright, and these zesty colours would have been like reaching out to you and like selling you the book. So that was a thing. Popular fiction. Finally, celebrity. Celebrities. I guess there's always been celebrities, but the whole thing seems to have been sort of accelerated by the widespread availability of print and people reading newspapers, magazines, things like that, which became a lot more affordable as well. So you got people like Marie Corelli, was a sort of superstar celebrity author. You know, people were as interested in her as they were in her books. You got people like Buffalo Bill. I mentioned the Victorian era exhibition, but there are also things like the Wild West show, which was a big display. Huge numbers of people would have been to see it, and even more would have heard about it. So the whole idea of the Wild West, and performers like Annie Oakley were, you know, bringing all of this stuff newly minted to Britain, and that those people were becoming huge celebrities. Jumbo the elephant was a real elephant. Obviously we might not be so keen on performing animals, but by the lights of the time was a well-loved creature, and of course has persisted in language, with jumbo things being big things. People are probably not so well remembered now, like Zazel, whose real name is Rosa or Rossa Matilda Richter. I think it's Rossa. She was an aerialist and the first person to be fired out of a cannonball.
Wow! Out of a cannonball?
Out of a cannon. So it was a human cannonball fired out of a cannon. And she did tightrope walking, stuff like that. So she was a fascinating person. So yes, celebrities. Okay, that is my list of Victorian crazes, and I'll be back soon with something else.
Bye-bye!